This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.
The summer air hung heavy with the scent of blooming roses and possibility. Anne Elliot's heart fluttered like a caged bird as she caught sight of Frederick Wentworth across the crowded ballroom. His naval uniform stood out among the sea of finery, a beacon of adventure and promise. Their eyes met, and the world fell away. Anne felt her cheeks flush as Frederick made his way towards her, weaving through the throng of dancers with the grace of a ship cutting through waves. "Miss Elliot," he said, his voice low and warm, "might I have the pleasure of this dance?" As they twirled across the polished floor, Anne's senses came alive. The rough fabric of Frederick's uniform beneath her fingertips, the subtle scent of sea salt that clung to him, the strength in his arms as he guided her through the steps. Every detail etched itself into her memory. Their courtship blossomed like a flower reaching for the sun. Stolen moments in secluded gardens became treasured memories. Frederick's eyes sparkled with determination as he spoke of his future. "I'll make my fortune at sea, Anne," he'd say, his voice brimming with confidence. "And when I return, I'll give you the life you deserve." Anne's heart soared with every word. In Frederick, she saw not just a handsome face, but a partner, an equal. His ambition matched her own quiet strength, and together they dreamed of a life filled with adventure and love. One balmy evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Frederick took Anne's hands in his. The rough calluses on his palms sent shivers down her spine as he dropped to one knee. "Anne Elliot," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "will you marry me?" Joy burst forth from Anne's chest like a firework. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes!" Tears streamed down her cheeks as Frederick swept her into his arms, their laughter echoing across the grounds. But their happiness was short-lived. Like storm clouds gathering on a sunny day, opposition to their union quickly arose. Sir Walter, Anne's father, recoiled at the thought of his daughter marrying a man of such little consequence. "A naval officer," Sir Walter scoffed, his nose wrinkling in disgust. "My dear, you cannot be serious. Think of your position, your future." Anne's stomach twisted into knots. She had expected resistance, but the vehemence of her father's disapproval shook her to her core. It was then that Lady Russell, Anne's godmother and trusted confidant, stepped into the fray. With a gentle touch and concerned eyes, she pulled Anne aside, her words a mix of comfort and caution. "My dear girl," Lady Russell began, her voice soft but firm, "I know you care for Frederick, but have you truly considered what life as a naval wife would mean?" She painted a vivid picture of long separations, financial struggles, and the constant worry that comes with loving a man at sea. Anne listened, her resolve wavering like a candle flame in the wind. Lady Russell's words wormed their way into her mind, planting seeds of doubt where once there had been only certainty. Days passed in a haze of tears and internal struggle. Anne's nights were restless, filled with dreams of a life with Frederick juxtaposed against the warnings of those she trusted most. She felt like a ship caught between two powerful currents, unable to chart a clear course. In the end, duty and the weight of expectation proved too heavy to bear. With a heart as heavy as lead, Anne made the agonizing decision to break off the engagement. The words stuck in her throat like thorns as she told Frederick, watching the light in his eyes dim and then harden into something cold and unfamiliar. "I see," Frederick said, his voice flat and devoid of the warmth that had once made Anne's heart sing. "If this is your choice, then so be it. Goodbye, Anne." He turned on his heel and walked away, each step driving a dagger deeper into Anne's heart. The sound of gravel crunching beneath his boots echoed in her ears long after he had disappeared from view. In the years that followed, Anne remained unmarried, a silent testament to the love she had lost. Other suitors came and went, but none could measure up to the memory of Frederick Wentworth. She watched her youth and beauty fade like the last rays of sunset, haunted by the constant refrain of "what if" that echoed in the quiet moments of her days. As she approached her 27th year, Anne Elliot stood at her window, gazing out at the world beyond. She was a woman marked by regret, forever wondering if she had made the right choice in yielding to persuasion rather than following her heart. The ghost of her younger self, full of hope and love, seemed to watch her from the shadows, a constant reminder of the path not taken. A chill ran down Anne's spine as she turned from the window. The grand halls of Kellynch, once filled with laughter and music, now seemed to whisper with secrets and regrets. As she made her way through the corridors, the floorboards creaked beneath her feet, each sound a haunting echo of the past. What new chapter would unfold within these walls, Anne wondered, her heart quickening with a mix of dread and anticipation. The grand halls of Kellynch echoed with an eerie silence, a far cry from the laughter and music that once filled its rooms. Sunlight filtered through dusty windows, casting long shadows across faded carpets and tarnished silverware. The air hung heavy with the scent of neglect and impending change. Anne Elliot, the middle daughter at 27, stood by the window, her fingers tracing patterns on the cold glass. Society might label her a spinster, but her mind was as sharp as ever, keenly aware of the precarious situation they faced. She felt the weight of their predicament like a physical presence, pressing down on her chest and making each breath a conscious effort. The family gathered in the drawing room, its opulent furnishings a stark reminder of better days. Sir Walter reclined in his favorite chair, his fingers, adorned with family rings, drumming an impatient rhythm on the arm. Elizabeth, a mirror image of her father's vanity, perched on the edge of the sofa, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Anne cleared her throat, the sound startlingly loud in the tense silence. "Father, Elizabeth," she began, her voice soft but determined. "We must consider reducing our expenses. Perhaps we could cut back on some luxuries or reduce the household staff?" The words hung in the air like a challenge. Sir Walter's face contorted as if he'd tasted something sour. "Reduce? My dear Anne, you speak as if we were common folk." His voice dripped with disdain, each syllable a sharp rebuke. Elizabeth tossed her head, her perfectly coiffed curls bouncing with the movement. "Really, Anne, how dreadfully dreary you've become." Her dismissive tone cut through Anne like a knife, reopening old wounds of inadequacy and disappointment. Anne's suggestions fell like pebbles into a vast, indifferent sea. She glanced at Lady Russell, hoping for support, but found only a sympathetic smile. The room felt suffocating, the weight of their denial pressing in from all sides. Anne's chest tightened, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps as the reality of their situation threatened to overwhelm her. As weeks passed, their debts mounted like storm clouds on the horizon. The family's lawyer, Mr. Shepherd, was summoned like a reluctant harbinger of bad news. His arrival at Kellynch was met with a mixture of dread and desperate hope. Mr. Shepherd entered the room, his very posture seeming to apologize for his presence. He laid out their options with careful delicacy, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sir Walter," he said, each word measured, "I'm afraid we must consider more. Drastic measures." The silence that followed was as thick as fog. Anne felt her heart racing, the rapid thump-thump echoing in her ears. She knew what was coming next, and the anticipation made her stomach churn. "I propose," Mr. Shepherd continued, his words falling like hammer blows, "that we consider renting out Kellynch Hall and relocating the family to a smaller residence in Bath." The suggestion hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Sir Walter's face turned an alarming shade of purple, his vanity warring with the harsh reality of their situation. "Leave Kellynch?" he sputtered, his voice rising with each word. It's unthinkable." But as the days wore on and the pressure from creditors mounted, even Sir Walter's iron will began to bend. The idea of Bath, with its social whirl and opportunities for admiration, slowly worked its magic on him and Elizabeth. Anne watched with a mixture of relief and resignation as her father and sister began to warm to the idea, their voices filled with plans for balls and social calls. The search for tenants began, a process that felt to Anne like selling off pieces of her heart. Each potential renter who walked through Kellynch's doors was another reminder of their fall from grace. When Admiral Croft and his wife Sophia were selected, a strange twist of fate sent Anne's world spinning. Mrs. Croft was the sister of Captain Wentworth, a name that still had the power to make Anne's breath catch in her throat. As news spread that Wentworth, now a wealthy and successful captain, had returned to England, Anne felt as if the ground beneath her feet had shifted. Memories she'd long suppressed came flooding back. Stolen glances across crowded rooms, whispered promises in moonlit gardens, and the crushing weight of regret that had haunted her for years. The days leading up to their departure from Kellynch were a whirlwind of activity. Trunks were packed, furniture covered, and precious heirlooms carefully wrapped. For Anne, each task felt like another nail in a coffin of dreams. She moved through the house like a ghost, her fingers trailing along familiar walls, committing every detail to memory. On their last evening at Kellynch, Anne stood alone in the garden, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. The air was heavy with the scent of roses, their perfume a bittersweet reminder of summers past. The thought of leaving, of potentially encountering Wentworth again, filled her with a mixture of dread and longing that threatened to overwhelm her. As the Elliot family's carriage pulled away from Kellynch Hall, Anne couldn't help but feel that they were leaving behind more than just bricks and mortar. They were leaving a chapter of their lives, stepping into an uncertain future where old wounds might resurface and new challenges awaited. The wheels turned, carrying them towards Bath, towards change, and towards the possibility of second chances. Anne's heart raced as she contemplated what lay ahead. The prospect of staying with her younger sister Mary at Uppercross Cottage loomed large in her mind, a temporary reprieve before joining her family in Bath. As the familiar landscape of Kellynch faded into the distance, Anne couldn't shake the feeling that her path was about to cross with Captain Wentworth once more. What would happen when they met again? Would the embers of their past love reignite, or had time extinguished any chance of reconciliation? With each turn of the carriage wheels, Anne edged closer to finding out, her future hanging in the balance. As the Crofts settled into Kellynch Hall, Anne braced herself for a change of scenery. She was to stay with her younger sister Mary Musgrove at Uppercross Cottage, a prospect that filled her with a mix of anticipation and dread. The carriage wheels crunched over gravel and fallen leaves as Anne journeyed to Uppercross. Outside, the world was ablaze with autumn colors, but inside, Anne's heart felt as gray as a winter sky. She gazed out the window, barely registering the passing landscape, her mind a whirlpool of emotions. The gentle sway of the carriage did little to soothe her restless spirit. As Uppercross Cottage came into view, its quaint charm failed to lift Anne's spirits. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. The air was crisp with the scent of apples and wood smoke, a stark contrast to the stuffiness of her father's grand house. Mary's shrill voice pierced the air before Anne had even alighted from the carriage. "Oh, Anne, you've finally arrived. I've been positively wasting away with this dreadful headache. Charles is no help at all, of course." Anne's lips curved into a practiced smile, her voice gentle as she replied, "I'm here now, Mary. Let's get you settled, shall we?" The days at Uppercross fell into a familiar, if trying, rhythm. Mary's complaints were a constant backdrop, like the ticking of an irritating clock. Yet amidst the chaos, Anne found unexpected warmth in the Musgrove family. Charles's parents and sisters, Louisa and Henrietta, embraced her with an affection that felt like balm to her oft-neglected heart. One crisp morning, as Anne helped Mary with her needlework, the quiet was shattered by Henrietta's excited entrance. "Captain Wentworth is coming to visit his sister at Kellynch," she exclaimed, her cheeks flushed with excitement. The needle slipped from Anne's suddenly numb fingers, pricking her thumb. A single drop of blood welled up, as vivid as the memories that flooded her mind. 8 years. It had been 8 years since she'd last seen Frederick Wentworth. The wound of their parting, which she'd thought long healed, throbbed anew. In the days that followed, Anne's anxiety grew like ivy, creeping through every corner of her mind. She found herself lingering before mirrors, searching for traces of the girl she once was. The fresh-faced maiden who had captured a naval officer's heart seemed to have vanished, leaving behind a woman with quiet eyes and a wistful smile. The evening of the dinner party arrived with an air of electric anticipation. Anne's hands trembled as she fastened her modest gown, her stomach a knot of dread and longing. The Musgroves' drawing room hummed with excitement, the air thick with perfume and expectation. And then he was there. Frederick Wentworth strode into the room, his presence commanding attention. Anne's breath caught in her throat. He was more handsome than she remembered, the years having chiseled his features to perfection. Their eyes met across the room, and for a heartbeat, time stood still. Then, like a ship passing in the night, his gaze slid past her. The chill of his indifference cut deeper than any harsh word could have. Throughout the evening, Anne watched from the sidelines as Wentworth charmed the Musgrove family. His laugh, once so familiar, now seemed to belong to a stranger. Louisa and Henrietta fluttered around him like butterflies, their girlish enthusiasm a stark reminder of Anne's own faded youth. "I'm quite ready to marry," Wentworth's voice carried across the room, clear and purposeful. "Any suitable woman would do." The words were a dagger to Anne's heart. She gripped her glass tighter, willing her face to remain impassive. The chatter of the party faded to a dull roar in her ears as she grappled with the realization that their past might truly be irretrievable. As the night wore on, Anne found herself increasingly isolated, a quiet island in a sea of merriment. She watched as Wentworth effortlessly captivated the entire Musgrove family, his confidence and charm on full display. The contrast between his easy manner with others and his cold politeness towards her was a constant, aching reminder of what she had lost. In the flickering candlelight, Anne's eyes traced the familiar lines of Wentworth's face, searching for any hint of the man she once knew. But like a ship that had long since sailed, he seemed beyond her reach, leaving her adrift in a sea of conflicting emotions and painful memories. As the party drew to a close, Anne retreated to her room, her heart heavy with unspoken words and unfulfilled dreams. She stood by the window, gazing out at the moonlit garden, when a flurry of activity caught her eye. Carriages were arriving, their lanterns piercing the darkness. A sense of anticipation filled the air, promising more than just a typical country gathering. What new surprises would tomorrow bring, and how would they reshape the delicate balance of her world? Life at Uppercross had transformed into a whirlwind of social activities. The once quiet country estate now buzzed with energy, its halls echoing with laughter and conversation. At the center of this bustling excitement was the charming Captain Wentworth, whose presence seemed to electrify the very air around him. The crisp autumn breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke as it rustled through the colorful foliage surrounding Uppercross. Inside, the warmth of crackling fires and animated chatter created a stark contrast to the cooling weather outside. The Musgrove sisters, Louisa and Henrietta, fluttered about like eager butterflies, their laughter and chatter filling the rooms. They competed openly for Wentworth's attention, their eyes sparkling with admiration whenever he spoke. Louisa, with her lively spirit and determined nature, appeared to be winning this unspoken contest. Her golden curls bounced as she leaned in closer to catch Wentworth's every word, her smile bright and unwavering. The soft glow of candlelight caught the sparkle in her eyes, making them dance with excitement. In the shadows of this merry scene stood Anne, her heart a tangle of conflicting emotions. She watched the interactions with a mixture of pain and resignation, each laugh and shared glance between Wentworth and Louisa, feeling like a tiny dagger in her chest. The jovial atmosphere only served to heighten her sense of isolation, like a discordant note in an otherwise harmonious melody. Despite her best efforts to avoid him, fate seemed determined to throw them together in social situations, creating moments of tension as thick and suffocating as a heavy fog. Anne's breath would catch in her throat, her pulse quickening whenever Wentworth entered a room. She found herself hyper-aware of his presence, attuned to the sound of his voice, the rhythm of his footsteps. During one particularly long walk with the Musgroves, the group ventured out into the countryside. The crisp autumn air filled with the scent of fallen leaves, the ground carpeted in shades of gold and russet. Anne found herself trailing behind, the crunch of gravel under her feet providing a steady rhythm to her tumultuous thoughts. Ahead, she could see Wentworth walking alongside Captain Benwick, a naval officer staying with the Harville family. His shoulders were slumped, his demeanor a stark contrast to Wentworth's confident stride. As the wind carried snippets of their conversation back to her, Anne's ears pricked up at the mention of Louisa's name. Wentworth's voice, warm and full of admiration, praised Louisa's resolute nature. "A woman who knows her own mind," he was saying, "is a treasure indeed. Louisa's firmness of character is truly admirable." The words hit Anne like a physical blow, knocking the breath from her lungs. She stumbled slightly, steadying herself against a nearby tree. Its rough bark grounded her as her mind spun with the implications of Wentworth's words. Was this not a thinly veiled criticism of her own past actions? The decision to break their engagement, made under the influence of others, now seemed to hang between them like an impenetrable wall. As the days passed, Anne found solace in an unexpected friendship. Captain Benwick, still raw with grief over the loss of his fiancée, sought out Anne's company. They would sit in the quiet corners of the house, heads bent over books of poetry, discussing the works of Byron and Wordsworth. The soft rustle of turning pages and the gentle murmur of their voices created a soothing cocoon, shielding them from the boisterous energy of the rest of the household. Anne's gentle understanding and keen intellect provided Benwick with a lifeline in his sea of sorrow. As she explained the nuances of a particularly moving verse, her voice soft and melodious, she could almost forget the sound of Wentworth's laugh echoing from the next room, where he was undoubtedly entertaining the Musgrove sisters. The changing of the seasons brought with it talk of a trip to Lyme Regis. The prospect of visiting Wentworth's friends, the Harvilles, sent a ripple of excitement through the group. For Anne, however, it was a source of both anticipation and dread. The idea of spending more time in Wentworth's company was both thrilling and terrifying, like standing on the edge of a cliff, torn between the desire to fly and the fear of falling. As autumn's golden hues gave way to the muted tones of early winter, the dynamics within the group continued to shift and evolve. The growing attachment between Wentworth and Louisa was impossible to ignore, their heads often bent close in conversation, their laughter mingling in the air. It was as if they were being pulled together by an invisible force, while Anne felt herself drifting further away, a leaf caught in the current of a stream. The upcoming trip to Lyme Regis loomed on the horizon, promising new experiences and the potential for further developments in the complex web of relationships that had formed at Uppercross. As the group made their preparations, an air of anticipation settled over them all, each person harboring their own hopes and fears for what the seaside visit might bring. On the eve of their departure, Anne stood at her bedroom window, gazing out at the moonlit landscape. The silvery light cast long shadows across the grounds, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. Her heart raced with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. What would this journey bring? Would it cement her place as an outsider, or could it possibly offer a chance to bridge the chasm between her and Wentworth? As she turned from the window, a gust of wind rattled the panes, carrying with it the faint sound of laughter from downstairs. Anne's breath caught in her throat as she recognized Wentworth's deep chuckle mingling with Louisa's melodious giggle. With trembling fingers, she reached for her traveling case, her mind whirling with possibilities. Little did she know that the coastal winds of Lyme Regis would soon blow in a tide of change, altering the course of their lives in ways none of them could have foreseen. The party set out on their journey to Lyme Regis, a picturesque seaside town. The group consisted of Anne, Wentworth, the Musgrove sisters, and Charles Musgrove, all eager for a change of scenery and new experiences. As they approached Lyme, the salty sea air filled their lungs, carrying with it the promise of adventure. The distant cry of seagulls welcomed them, a melodic chorus heralding their arrival. Anne felt her spirits lift, the weight of her past momentarily forgotten, as she gazed upon the town nestled between rolling hills and the vast expanse of the English Channel. The autumn sunlight danced on the water, creating a shimmering tapestry that seemed to beckon them closer. Upon arrival, they were greeted by Wentworth's friends, Captain and Mrs. Harville. Their warm smiles and hearty handshakes immediately put everyone at ease, wrapping the newcomers in a cocoon of hospitality. To their surprise, they also encountered Captain Benwick, a melancholic figure staying with the Harvilles. His quiet demeanor and love for poetry intrigued Anne, who found herself drawn into deep conversations with him during their walks along the famous Cobb. The days passed in a whirl of pleasant activities, each moment etching itself into Anne's memory. They explored the town's narrow streets, their footsteps echoing off the cobblestones as they discovered quaint shops and cozy tea rooms. The aroma of freshly baked scones and brewing tea wafted through the air, tempting them at every turn. The group often found themselves on the Cobb, where the crash of waves against the stone structure provided a constant, soothing backdrop to their conversations. Anne couldn't help but notice the growing closeness between Wentworth and Louisa. Their laughter carried on the sea breeze, light and carefree, and their stolen glances spoke volumes. A twinge of something, was it regret, tugged at Anne's heart, but she pushed it aside, focusing instead on the beauty of their surroundings and the stimulating discussions with Captain Benwick. One crisp morning, as gulls wheeled overhead and the sun peeked through scattered clouds, the group decided to take another walk on the Cobb. The air was charged with an inexplicable energy, as if nature itself sensed the impending shift in their lives. The sea churned restlessly, mirroring the unspoken tension within the group. Louisa, her cheeks flushed with excitement and a desire to impress, spotted a set of stone steps leading down from the higher part of the Cobb. Her eyes sparkled with mischief as she declared her intention to jump down them, despite Wentworth's warnings. "Louisa, my dear, it's not safe," Wentworth cautioned, his voice tinged with concern. But Louisa, emboldened by his previous praise of her spirit and determination, merely laughed off his worries. "Nonsense, I'm as light as a feather and twice as nimble," she proclaimed, tossing her hair back defiantly. Time seemed to slow as Louisa prepared to jump. Anne's heart raced, a sense of foreboding washing over her like an icy wave. She opened her mouth to protest, but it was too late. Louisa leaped, her skirts billowing around her like the wings of a bird taking flight. For a moment she was graceful, suspended in midair. Then in a heartbeat, everything changed. Louisa's foot slipped, and she plummeted downward, her body twisting unnaturally. The sickening thud of her head striking the pavement echoed across the Cobb, followed by a collective gasp of horror from the group. Chaos erupted. Henrietta, overcome by the sight of her sister's motionless form, swooned and would have fallen if not for Charles's quick reflexes. Wentworth stood frozen, his face a mask of guilt and shock, unable to tear his eyes away from Louisa's crumpled figure. In this moment of crisis, it was Anne who stepped forward, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the panic surrounding her. With a clear, steady voice, she took charge of the situation, her words cutting through the chaos like a beacon of hope. "Charles, please take care of Henrietta," she instructed. "Captain Benwick, run to town and fetch a surgeon immediately. Captain Wentworth, we must move Louisa to a safe place. The Harvilles' house is closest." Her words seemed to break the spell of inaction. The men sprang into motion, following her directions without question. As they carefully lifted Louisa, Anne knelt beside her, checking her breathing and pulse with gentle, practiced movements. The world around them faded away, leaving only the sound of Louisa's shallow breaths and the pounding of Anne's own heart. The journey to the Harvilles' house felt interminable. Anne walked alongside the makeshift stretcher, her hand resting lightly on Louisa's arm, offering what comfort she could. She was acutely aware of Wentworth's gaze upon her, a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, more complex in his eyes. As they reached the Harvilles' doorstep, Anne caught Wentworth's eye. In that fleeting moment, a spark of understanding passed between them. The accident and Anne's response to it had shifted something fundamental in their relationship. The seeds of renewed respect and admiration had been sown, promising a change in the tide of their intertwined destinies. As the door to the Harvilles' house swung open, Anne took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. Little did she know that this moment of crisis would be the catalyst for a profound transformation, not just in her relationship with Wentworth, but in her own sense of self. The true test of her strength and compassion was only just beginning. In the aftermath of Louisa's accident, Anne's true nature emerged. Her innate strength and compassion shone brightly as she stepped into the role of primary caregiver. The Harvilles' small cottage, once a haven of tranquility, now buzzed with worried whispers and hurried footsteps. The air was thick with the scent of medicinal herbs and the lingering aroma of strong tea, brewed to steady nerves. Anne moved through the rooms like a gentle breeze, her presence soothing frayed nerves and bringing order to the tumult. Her soft footsteps on the worn wooden floors were a stark contrast to the frantic pacing of others. She liaised with the doctor, her voice steady as she relayed information and asked pertinent questions. Her eyes, usually soft with kindness, now held a steely determination that commanded respect. As night fell, Anne found herself by Louisa's bedside, her hand resting lightly on the unconscious girl's arm. The room was bathed in the warm glow of candlelight, casting long shadows on the walls. Outside, the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore provided a constant, soothing backdrop. Anne's mind raced with plans and possibilities, weighing options and considering outcomes. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders, a familiar burden she hadn't realized she'd missed. The next morning, as the group gathered to discuss their next steps, Anne's voice cut through the worried chatter. "I'll stay," she said simply, her words falling into a sudden hush. All eyes turned to her, surprise evident on their faces. "I can help care for Louisa," she continued, her tone leaving no room for argument. "It's the most practical solution." Wentworth's gaze met hers across the room, a mix of emotions playing across his features. Gratitude, admiration, and something deeper, something unspoken, passed between them in that fleeting moment. The air crackled with unresolved tension, years of misunderstanding and regret hanging between them like a gossamer veil. As he prepared to leave for Uppercross, tasked with the unenviable job of informing Louisa's parents, Wentworth paused by Anne's side. No words were exchanged, but the look they shared spoke volumes. It was as if he was seeing her anew, rediscovering the woman he had once loved so deeply. Anne's heart raced, her breath catching in her throat as she fought to maintain her composure. In the days that followed, Anne found an unexpected companion in Captain Benwick. Their shared love of literature became a bridge, spanning the gulf of grief that had isolated Benwick for so long. They would sit by the fire in the evenings, the crackling flames casting a warm glow on the pages of the books they discussed. The scent of old paper and leather bindings mingled with the salty sea air that seeped through the cottage windows. Anne gently steered their conversations away from the melancholy verses that Benwick clung to, introducing him to works that spoke of hope and renewal. She watched as the spark of life slowly returned to his eyes like a flower turning towards the sun after a long winter. As Louisa's condition improved, Anne couldn't help but notice the growing closeness between her and Benwick. It was like watching a delicate flower unfurl its petals, tentative at first, but gaining strength with each passing day. Benwick's attentiveness to Louisa was touching, his quiet presence a balm to her recovering spirit. Anne felt a bittersweet pang in her chest, a mixture of joy for their budding connection and a wistful longing for what might have been in her own life. The days in Lyme blended into weeks, each one bringing small but significant improvements in Louisa's health. Anne found herself at the heart of it all, a steady presence that everyone had come to rely on. She moved through the cottage with quiet efficiency, her actions speaking louder than words ever could. The constant rhythm of care, changing bandages, administering medicine, offering words of comfort, became a soothing routine. As the time approached for Anne to leave Lyme, she felt a bittersweet pang. The crisis had revealed aspects of herself that had long been dormant, reminding those around her, and perhaps even herself, of the strength and compassion that lay at her core. She had earned not just gratitude, but a deep and abiding respect from all who had witnessed her unwavering dedication. Standing on the threshold of the Harvilles' cottage, ready to depart, Anne took one last look at the scene before her. The small, cozy room that had been the center of so much worry and hope, the faces of those who had become dear friends in such a short time, and the lingering presence of Wentworth in her thoughts. She stepped out into the crisp morning air, the sea breeze carrying the promise of change. Her time in Lyme had been a catalyst, setting in motion shifts in relationships and perceptions that would ripple out far beyond this small coastal town. As Anne turned to wave a final goodbye, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was not an ending, but a new beginning. The carriage awaited her, its polished wood gleaming in the early morning light. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the journey ahead. As she settled into her seat, a sudden jolt of apprehension coursed through her. What awaited her beyond Lyme? How would the events of the past weeks shape her future? The carriage wheels began to turn, each rotation carrying her further from the seaside town that had become a sanctuary. The rhythmic clatter against the road echoed the tumultuous beating of her heart. As the familiar sights of Lyme receded into the distance, Anne closed her eyes, bracing herself for whatever lay ahead. Little did she know, the true test of her newfound strength was only just beginning. The carriage wheels clattered against the cobblestones, each jolt mirroring the unease in Anne's chest. The countryside melted away, replaced by grand Georgian buildings and bustling streets. Bath loomed before her, a world of pretense and social machinations so different from the quiet simplicity she'd left behind. As they entered the city, the air grew thick with coal smoke and the clamor of voices. Anne's nose wrinkled at the unfamiliar scents, a far cry from the fresh, open fields of her former home. The carriage wound its way through narrow streets, finally coming to a stop before a townhouse that seemed to shrink under the weight of its own importance. Sir Walter and Elizabeth greeted her with brittle smiles, their eyes darting about as if searching for approval from invisible onlookers. Their new home, though situated in a fashionable part of Bath, felt like a gilded cage, all show and no substance. "Anne, darling," Elizabeth's voice was strained, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "You simply must meet our new friend, Mrs. Clay. She's been such a comfort to us in these trying times." Anne's gaze fell upon the widowed woman, whose presence struck a discordant note in the family tableau. Mrs. Clay simpered and flattered, her attentiveness to Sir Walter setting off alarm bells in Anne's mind. Could this woman have designs on her father? The thought sent a chill down Anne's spine, colder than the damp Bath air. Days blurred into a whirlwind of social obligations. Balls, concerts, and promenades left Anne feeling like a ship tossed on a stormy sea. She longed for the gentle rhythm of country life, the whisper of leaves in the wind, the comforting predictability of rural routines. Seeking respite from the overwhelming bustle, Anne made her way to visit her old school friend, Mrs. Smith. The journey to her modest lodgings was like descending into another world, far removed from the glittering facade of Bath's upper circles. Each step down the narrow, poorly lit staircase felt like a step away from the artifice of her new life. Mrs. Smith's small room was a stark contrast to the opulent spaces Anne had grown accustomed to. Yet as they talked, Anne found herself in awe of her friend's resilience. Despite her hardships, Mrs. Smith's eyes sparkled with an inner light, her laughter genuine and warm. "My dear Anne," Mrs. Smith said, clasping her hand, "life may not always be kind, but it is always an adventure." The words struck Anne like a bolt of lightning, illuminating her own situation in a new light. One evening, Anne found herself swept along to a concert at the upper rooms. The air was thick with perfume and the rustle of silk gowns, the chatter of the crowd rising and falling like waves against a shore. As she navigated through the press of bodies, her eyes were drawn to a familiar face. Her cousin, Mr. William Elliot, the heir to her father's estate. Time seemed to slow, the noise of the crowd fading to a dull roar as their gazes met across the room. Mr. Elliot, who had once snubbed the family, now approached with a charming smile and attentive manner. His sudden interest in Anne and eagerness to reconcile with Sir Walter set off a cacophony of warning bells in her mind. "Miss Anne," he said, bowing low, his voice smooth as honey, "it's been far too long. I hope you'll allow me to make amends for my past behavior." Anne's response was guarded, her smile polite but reserved. As they exchanged pleasantries, she found herself studying Mr. Elliot, trying to discern his true intentions. His charm was undeniable, but there was something in his eyes that gave her pause, a calculation that didn't quite match his warm words. Lady Russell, ever watchful, observed this interaction with keen interest. Later, as they strolled arm in arm along the Royal Crescent, the golden light of sunset painting the buildings in warm hues, she broached the subject. "Anne, my dear," she began, her voice filled with hope, "Mr. Elliot seems quite taken with you. Have you considered him as a potential suitor?" Anne's heart constricted at the thought, like a fist closing around it. While Mr. Elliot might seem a suitable match on paper, something held her back from embracing the idea. "I'm not sure, Lady Russell," she replied carefully, her words carried away by the evening breeze. "It's all happened so quickly." As the days passed, Anne found herself caught in a whirlwind of social obligations and internal conflict. She navigated the treacherous waters of Bath society, all the while trying to unravel the mystery of Mr. Elliot's sudden attentiveness. The city, once so overwhelming, now felt like a stage upon which a complex drama was unfolding. Then, like a thunderclap on a clear day, came the news that sent Anne's carefully constructed composure crumbling. Captain Wentworth had arrived in Bath. The name alone was enough to set her heart racing, memories of their past flooding back with startling clarity. As she stood by the window of their Bath residence watching the rain-slicked streets below, Anne felt a mixture of hope and anxiety wash over her. The arrival of Captain Wentworth in this already complicated social landscape promised to bring new tensions and possibilities. Anne's mind whirled with questions and possibilities. Would they meet? What would she say? How would he look at her after all these years? As night fell and the lamps were lit in the streets below, Anne couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Little did she know that Mr. William Elliot's pursuit of her was about to intensify, setting the stage for a battle of hearts and wills that would shake the very foundations of her world. Mr. William Elliot's pursuit of Anne grew more fervent with each passing day. He sought her company at every social event, his visits becoming increasingly frequent and purposeful. The crisp autumn air of Bath carried whispers and knowing glances through its elegant streets. In drawing rooms adorned with gilded mirrors and plush velvet curtains, society buzzed with speculation about Mr. Elliot's obvious attentions to Anne. Sir Walter, Anne's father, strutted about like a peacock, his vanity swelling at the prospect of such an advantageous match for his daughter. Even Elizabeth, usually aloof and disinterested in Anne's affairs, found herself warming to the idea of her sister's potential elevation in society. Lady Russell, ever the pragmatist, saw in Mr. Elliot the key to securing the Elliot family's legacy. Her eyes gleamed with approval whenever she observed the pair together, her mind already racing with plans for the future. Anne, however, felt like a ship caught in conflicting currents. Mr. Elliot's charm was undeniable, his manners impeccable, yet something about him left her uneasy, a nagging doubt that gnawed at the edges of her consciousness. She watched him navigate the treacherous waters of Bath's social circles with the skill of a seasoned sailor, his every word and gesture calculated for maximum effect. As the golden leaves of autumn gave way to winter's first frost, Anne's reservations about Mr. Elliot grew like icicles on a rooftop. His interest in her father's social connections seemed too keen, his behavior too perfectly tailored to please. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching a masterful performance rather than glimpsing a genuine soul. Into this delicate dance of courtship and doubt stepped Captain Wentworth, his presence in Bath like a sudden gust of wind, stirring up long-buried feelings. One afternoon, as Anne hurried along Milsom Street, her cheeks flushed from the cold and her breath visible in the chilly air, she quite literally bumped into him. Their eyes met, and for a moment the bustling street faded away. The world narrowed to just the two of them, standing amid the swirl of fashionable shoppers and clattering carriages. It was then that Mr. Elliot appeared, all solicitous concern for Anne. The flash of jealousy in Wentworth's eyes was unmistakable, igniting a spark of hope in Anne's heart that she had thought long extinguished. From that moment, every gathering became a subtle battlefield of emotions. At the Musgroves' lodgings, Anne found herself hyper-aware of Wentworth's presence, their old rapport slowly re-emerging like spring flowers, pushing through the last of winter's snow. They spoke of Louisa's recovery, of the dramatic events in Lyme, their words laden with unspoken meanings. "Your assistance during that terrible time was invaluable, Miss Anne," Wentworth said, his voice low and sincere. "I don't know how we would have managed without you." Anne felt a warmth bloom in her chest at his words, even as she struggled to maintain her composure. "I'm sure anyone would have done the same," she replied, her eyes meeting his for a brief, electric moment. Yet for every step forward, there seemed to be 2 steps back. Social obligations pulled them apart. Misunderstandings arose like walls between them. Anne found herself torn, caught between the expectations of her family regarding Mr. Elliot and the persistent ache of her feelings for Wentworth. The arrival of Admiral and Mrs. Croft in Bath added another layer to the already complex tapestry of Anne's emotions. They brought news of Louisa's improving health, their words tinged with hints of a blossoming relationship between her and Captain Benwick. This information swirled in Anne's mind like leaves caught in an autumn breeze, raising questions about Wentworth's current emotional state and intentions. As the social season in Bath progressed, Anne felt like a ship tossed on stormy seas. Mr. Elliot's attentions continued unabated, a constant presence that both flattered and unsettled her. Her rekindling connection with Wentworth flickered like a candle in a drafty room, sometimes bright with promise, other times threatening to gut her out entirely. All the while, the weight of her family's expectations and society's watchful eye pressed down upon her like a heavy cloak. In quiet moments, Anne found herself staring out at the elegant Georgian architecture of Bath, its symmetry and order a stark contrast to the tumult of her heart. The pale winter sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone streets, mirroring the conflicting emotions that stretched across her soul. As twilight descended on the city, painting the sky in hues of lavender and gold, Anne stood by her window, lost in thought. The soft murmur of voices from the street below drifted up to her, a reminder of the bustling world beyond her inner turmoil. She knew that soon she would have to navigate these treacherous waters and chart a course for her future. Suddenly, a familiar voice caught her attention. Anne's heart skipped a beat as she listened intently. Admiral and Mrs. Anne's heart skipped a beat as she listened intently. Admiral and Mrs. Croft were sharing unexpected news that would change everything. Louisa Musgrove, once seemingly attached to Captain Wentworth, had become engaged to Captain Benwick. The revelation washed over Anne like a cool, refreshing wave on a scorching summer day. It swept away the fears that had clung to her like stubborn seaweed, leaving her feeling light and buoyant. With Louisa no longer an obstacle, the path to Wentworth seemed to clear, much like storm clouds parting to reveal a hopeful, azure sky. As the days passed, Anne found herself increasingly in Wentworth's company. The air around them crackled with unspoken words and lingering glances. Their encounters, once stilted and awkward, now held a warmth that reminded her of their past. She noticed how his eyes would linger on her, like sunlight caressing a delicate flower, and how his voice softened when he addressed her directly, each word a gentle caress to her ears. One evening, at a concert where the air hung thick with music and whispered conversations, Anne found herself cornered by a persistent gentleman. His attentions, though polite, felt suffocating, like a too tight corset restricting her breath. Just as she was about to make her excuses, Wentworth appeared at her side like a guardian angel stepping out of the shadows. With a few well-chosen words and a protective stance, he smoothly redirected the gentleman's attention. The small act spoke volumes, and Anne felt a warmth bloom in her chest, spreading through her body like honey on a warm scone. Yet, for every step forward, there seemed to be a step back. Social obligations swirled around them like leaves in an autumn wind, keeping them apart when they longed to be near. Misunderstandings arose, as common as pebbles on a beach, each one threatening to trip up their fragile reconnection. Anne's heart ached with each missed opportunity, each misinterpreted glance. Mr. Elliot, ever present and ever attentive, cast a long shadow over their budding relationship. His persistent pursuit of Anne was like a thorn in Wentworth's side, visible in the tightening of his jaw and the darkening of his gaze whenever Mr. Elliot approached. The tension between the two men was palpable, like the charged air before a thunderstorm. On a crisp morning walk through Bath, where the air was sharp with the scent of fallen leaves and possibility, fate smiled on Anne. She encountered Admiral Croft, his weathered face creased with a knowing smile that made her heart flutter with anticipation. As they strolled along the bustling streets, he dropped hints about Wentworth's interest in her, his words as carefully placed as breadcrumbs, leading her to hope. The Admiral spoke of Wentworth's improved opinion of the Elliot family, and Anne's heart soared like a kite caught in a strong breeze, her spirits lifting with each step. The Crofts, in their quiet way, seemed to nurture the rekindling relationship. They would often maneuver social situations to bring Anne and Wentworth together, like skilled gardeners cultivating a delicate plant. Their subtle machinations didn't go unnoticed by Anne, who felt a surge of gratitude for their gentle interference. As the social season in Bath progressed, Anne found herself at the center of a whirlwind of emotions and expectations. Each dinner, concert, and gathering became a stage for their unspoken feelings, a dance of stolen glances and barely there touches. Wentworth's presence was a constant, comforting hum in the background of her thoughts, like a favorite melody she couldn't shake. Despite the uncertainty that clung to her like morning mist, Anne's heart remained steadfast. She navigated the complexities of her social world with grace, all the while holding on to the hope of a second chance with Wentworth. It was as if their love, once a thought lost, had been a seed dormant in winter, now slowly awakening with the promise of spring. As she attended yet another social gathering, her eyes seeking out Wentworth in the crowd, Anne's heart remained firmly fixed on him. She clung to the hope of rekindling the love they once shared, like a sailor holding fast to a lifeline in stormy seas. The room buzzed with chatter and laughter, but for Anne, it all faded into the background as she caught sight of Wentworth across the room. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world stood still. Anne's breath caught in her throat as Wentworth began to make his way towards her, weaving through the crowd with determination. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat a silent prayer. Just as he was about to reach her, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. Anne's footsteps faltered as she turned toward the disturbance, her mind racing with possibilities. What new twist of fate awaited her now, just as Wentworth was within reach? Anne's footsteps echoed on the cobblestone streets of Bath. She made her way to Mrs. Smith's modest lodgings, her heart quickening with each step. The crisp air carried the briny scent of the nearby harbor, mingling with the earthy aroma of damp stone. Anne pulled her shawl tighter, the rough wool scratching against her neck. Her mind raced with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. What urgent news could Mrs. Smith possibly have? As she entered the small, dimly lit room, the stark contrast between Mrs. Smith's current circumstances and her former life hit Anne like a physical blow. The faded wallpaper and threadbare rug spoke volumes of her friend's reduced circumstances. Mrs. Smith's eyes, though weary, sparkled with a mix of anticipation and unease. "My dear Anne," Mrs. Smith began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'm afraid I have some rather unsettling news about Mr. William Elliot." Anne's breath caught in her throat. She had always felt an inexplicable discomfort around Mr. Elliot, despite his charm and attention. Now, as Mrs. Smith's words tumbled out like water from a broken dam, Anne's instincts were confirmed in the most shocking way. The tale Mrs. Smith wove was one of deceit and callousness that made Anne's skin crawl. Mr. Elliot, it seemed, was not the gentleman he appeared to be. His first marriage, Mrs. Smith revealed, had been nothing more than a calculated move to secure wealth. "But surely," Anne interjected, her voice trembling, "he must have shown some remorse." Mrs. Smith's bitter laugh was answer enough. It echoed off the bare walls, filling the room with a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. She went on to describe how, after his wife's death, Mr. Elliot had cut all ties with her family, leaving Mrs. Smith herself in financial ruin. "And now," Mrs. Smith continued, her eyes locked on Anne's, "he pursues you with the same mercenary intent." The words hit Anne like a punch to the gut. She felt the blood drain from her face as the realization dawned on her. Mr. Elliot's interest in her was nothing more than a ploy to secure his position as Sir Walter's heir. His fear of a potential remarriage that could produce a male heir suddenly cast all his actions in a new, sordid light. With trembling hands, Mrs. Smith produced letters, damning evidence of Mr. Elliot's true nature. As Anne read his scathing opinions of her family and his schemes to ingratiate himself with them, she felt a strange mix of vindication and disgust. The paper crinkled beneath her fingers, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet room. The weight of this knowledge settled on Anne's shoulders like a heavy cloak. She knew she must warn her family, though a part of her doubted they would believe her. Mr. Elliot had woven his web of charm too well. As she left Mrs. Smith's lodgings, the world seemed altered. The streets that had seemed so familiar now felt treacherous, hiding secrets behind every corner. The chatter of passers-by grated on her nerves, their carefree laughter a stark contrast to the turmoil in her mind. Yet amidst the chaos of her thoughts, Anne felt a strange sense of clarity. This revelation had removed Mr. Elliot as a potential suitor in her mind, allowing her to focus on her feelings for Wentworth without distraction or guilt. The truth about Mr. Elliot had acted like a prism, refracting her emotions and priorities into sharp focus. Walking home, Anne's steps were lighter despite the heavy information she carried. She felt a renewed determination to follow her heart, to not be swayed by considerations of rank or fortune as she had been in her youth. The truth about Mr. Elliot had served as a turning point, reinforcing her values and clarifying her priorities as she navigated her relationships and her future. As she approached her family's residence, Anne paused, her hand on the door knocker. The weight of the secret she carried pressed down on her, making her hesitate. How would she break this news to her family? Would they even believe her? And what of Mr. Elliot's reaction when he realized his true nature had been exposed? With a deep breath, Anne pushed open the door, only to be greeted by the unexpected sound of laughter and conversation. The gentle hum filled the air, creating a warm and inviting atmosphere that seemed at odds with the turmoil in her heart. As she stepped inside, Anne found herself drawn into the heart of a gathering she hadn't expected, her senses overwhelmed by the soft glow of candlelight and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed tea. And there, in the center of it all, stood Mr. Elliot, his charming smile fixed firmly in place as he turned to greet her. The gentle hum of conversation and laughter filled the air, creating a warm and inviting atmosphere. Anne found herself drawn into the heart of the gathering, her senses alive with the soft glow of candlelight and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed tea. The room seemed to pulse with an energy that mirrored the quickening of her own heart as she engaged in a profound discussion with Captain Harville. Their words danced around the delicate subject of love's constancy, each syllable charged with unspoken emotion. Harville's voice, rich and passionate, rose and fell like the waves he so often sailed upon. "You see, Miss Elliot," he said, his eyes shining with conviction, "men's hearts are like anchors, steadfast and true. We sailors carry the memory of our loved ones across vast oceans, our devotion unwavering." Anne felt a familiar ache bloom in her chest, her own experiences bubbling to the surface like a spring long hidden beneath layers of earth. She took a deep breath, the scent of tea leaves and warm conversation filling her lungs, gathering her courage to counter his claims. "But Captain," she began, her voice soft yet resolute, "women's hearts are like lighthouses, ever burning, even when all hope of a ship's return has faded." As they debated, the room seemed to fade away, leaving only their impassioned exchange. The chatter of other guests became a distant murmur, like the sound of waves lapping at a far-off shore. Unbeknownst to Anne, Captain Wentworth sat nearby, his pen poised over a letter, his attention wholly captured by their conversation. His fingers tightened around the quill, knuckles white with tension as he hung on every word. Anne's arguments flowed like a river, carving new paths in the rocky terrain of their discussion. Her cheeks flushed with the heat of her convictions, lending a rosy glow to her usually pale complexion. "Women love longest," she declared, her voice trembling with barely concealed emotion, "even when all hope is gone." Wentworth's hand tightened around his pen, his eyes fixed on Anne's flushed face. Her words seemed to pierce through the years of misunderstanding and hurt, rekindling a flame he thought long extinguished. The scratch of his quill against paper was lost in the intensity of the moment, drowned out by the beating of his own heart. The debate reached its crescendo as Anne spoke of women's capacity for enduring love, her own experiences lending weight to her arguments. "We are constant," she said, her eyes bright with unshed tears, "in our joy and in our sorrow." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, like mist clinging to a morning shore. As the gathering began to disperse, the air thick with unspoken emotions, Wentworth felt a surge of inspiration. His pen flew across the paper, pouring out 8 years of longing and regret into a heartfelt letter. The words flowed from him like a tide finally breaking free, each sentence a testament to the love that had endured despite time and circumstance. With trembling hands, he seized a moment of distraction to place the letter where Anne would find it. His heart raced as he left the room, hope and fear warring within him like two ships locked in battle. The soft rustle of paper against wood seemed to echo in his ears as he made his escape, every step carrying him further from the woman who held his heart. Anne, her mind still reeling from the intense conversation, noticed the letter. The crisp white paper stood out against the dark wood of the table, drawing her eye like a beacon. As she unfolded it, her world seemed to hold its breath. The chatter of the room faded to a distant hum as her eyes devoured Wentworth's words, each line a balm to her long-suffering heart. Joy, pure and overwhelming, washed over her as she realized their love had withstood the test of time and misunderstanding. In that moment, surrounded by the fading echoes of their debate on love's constancy, Anne found her own constancy rewarded beyond her wildest dreams. Her fingers traced the words on the page, feeling the indentations left by Wentworth's passionate scrawl. As she reached the final line, Anne's breath caught in her throat. Her heart began to race, pounding against her ribs like a caged bird seeking freedom. With shaking hands, she clutched the letter to her chest, her mind whirling with the implications of what she had just read. The world around her seemed to fade away, leaving only the thundering of her own pulse in her ears as she prepared to face the consequences of this unexpected revelation. Anne's heart thundered in her chest as she read Wentworth's letter. Emotion surged through her like a tidal wave, threatening to overwhelm her senses. Without a second thought, she rushed out into the streets of Bath, her feet carrying her swiftly over the cobblestones. The crisp autumn air nipped at her cheeks as she hurried past elegant townhouses and bustling shops. The city's usual charm was lost on her. Her mind was consumed by a singular purpose. She barely noticed the curious glances from passers-by as she quickened her pace, her skirts swishing around her ankles. Anne's breath came in short gasps as she reached a nearby park. Her eyes darted around, searching desperately for Wentworth's familiar figure. There in a secluded corner, shaded by a grand old oak, she spotted him. The world seemed to slow down as their eyes met across the distance. "Frederick," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. Wentworth stood frozen, his face a canvas of hope and uncertainty. "Anne," he breathed, taking a hesitant step forward. The air between them crackled with tension as Anne closed the distance. She could smell the faint scent of sea salt that always clung to him, a reminder of his naval career. Her hands trembled as she spoke, her voice soft but steady. "I received your letter." Those simple words seemed to break a dam. Suddenly, they were both speaking at once, years of misunderstandings and unspoken feelings pouring out in a torrent of words. "I thought I had moved on," Wentworth confessed, his voice thick with emotion. "But seeing you again in Uppercross, it was like a spark reigniting a flame I thought long extinguished." Anne listened intently, her heart aching with every word. When it was her turn to speak, she took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I've regretted my decision every day since I made it," she admitted, her eyes never leaving his. "I was young, insecure, and too easily swayed. But my feelings for you never wavered, Frederick. Not once in all these years." As they continued to talk, the years of hurt and misunderstanding began to melt away. The cool autumn breeze rustled the leaves above them, nature's gentle accompaniment to their reconciliation. They discovered that while time had changed them both, the essence of their love remained untouched, like a precious gem finally unearthed after years of being buried. Their words flowed freely now, painting a picture of a shared future filled with love and adventure. Promises were made, not lightly, but with the weight of experience and the joy of rediscovered love. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park, Anne and Wentworth made their way back to share their news. The reactions of their friends and family were as varied as the autumn leaves adorning Bath's trees. Sir Walter, ever conscious of status, gave his consent with a mixture of reluctance and satisfaction. "Well," he said, his voice dripping with residual snobbery, "I suppose a captain of the Navy is not such a bad match after all, especially one with such improved circumstances." Lady Russell, to everyone's surprise, welcomed the news with grace and humility. "My dear Anne," she said, her eyes shining with genuine happiness, "I see now what I could not see before. Your joy is all that matters, and I couldn't be happier for you both." As word spread, their friends rallied around them in celebration. The Crofts beamed with pride, while the Musgroves expressed their delight with enthusiastic embraces and heartfelt congratulations. The air was filled with laughter and joy, a stark contrast to the loneliness and regret that had plagued Anne for so long. In quiet moments alone, Anne and Wentworth found themselves discussing their future with eager anticipation. They talked of his naval career and her willingness to brave the seas alongside him, their words weaving a tapestry of shared dreams and aspirations. "I never dared to hope for this," Anne confessed one evening, her hand nestled comfortably in Wentworth's as they walked along the Royal Crescent. The golden light of the setting sun bathed the Georgian architecture in a warm glow, mirroring the warmth in their hearts. Wentworth squeezed her hand gently. "Perhaps it wasn't foolish, Anne. We've both grown, learned, and changed. Our love now is stronger for having weathered the storms of time and circumstance." As they embarked on their new life together, Anne and Wentworth stood stronger than ever. The winding path that had led them back to each other only served to deepen their appreciation for the precious gift of their reunited hearts. With friends and family celebrating their union, they looked to the future with hope, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, hand in hand and heart in heart. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. As darkness fell over Bath, it marked not an ending, but a beginning, the start of a new chapter in Anne and Wentworth's lives, one filled with the promise of enduring love and shared adventures.
This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.